So after the West Ham win, a lot of people were talking about how Rosenior's won 6 out of his first 7, and some people made reference to the joke, and I'm just too mature for that. I'm not going to be drawn into some childish joke about 6, 7 or anything like that. However, what's up guys and welcome to the Blues and Stripes. So yet another week where I feel weird because, as I've said before, I'm often seen as one of the more negative voices. Now, I personally see myself as realistic. I can look at a situation like with Maresca, and I could see a lot of the flaws that were there from last season even, and I wasn't convinced that he was going to do anything with this team. Even if we got him the best players, I still worried about how his tactics would work in the Premier League. And so I looked at it very realistically. A lot of people saw that as very negative, but now I'm in this weird situation where somehow I feel like one of the more positive voices, and I don't really understand where it's come from. And the other thing that I find weird about it too is whenever I criticize Maresca for something, typically I was looking at it from he didn't try this, and I feel like he should have. And some of it was players he wasn't playing, and I think I've been justified in some of my thoughts, like the fact he wasn't playing Achimpong. We saw a few games where he looked good. Of course, now Rosenior doesn't seem to be playing him as much, so I don't know what's going on there. But Hato and Santos are another good example. I said Maresca should be utilizing them more, but he was hardly playing them. He was overusing Caicedo and Cucurella and Fernandez. He wasn't giving them much of a break, and so we saw sometimes they were not at their best. And now Rosenior's come in, and he's actually trying to give them chances to play. And outside of the West Ham match, Hato's looked good, and Santos has been very solid in the midfield. So I think I was justified in saying Maresca was not utilizing some of these players as much as he should have been. But what's funny to me is the reaction to the Arsenal match, which, again, I've said it after the first leg, losing to Arsenal, never a good feeling. Outside of the fact that a lot of Arsenal fans are delusional, they're cocky despite hardly winning anything these days, it's just never good to lose to your rivals. So I understand the frustration with it. However, a lot of people are saying that Rosenior approached this match so wrong tactically. And what I find hilarious is, like I said, I criticize Maresca for stuff he didn't try to do. They're criticizing Rosenior for something he did try, and it was proved to not be a good idea. Because I've seen several people say we didn't throw enough forward. We sat back too much in the first half. We should have just gone at them. Look at the second half. We did start putting players on that did make us more attacking. We started throwing people forward. And look at what happened. It led to them scoring on a breakaway. You wanted him to do that the whole match? There's a good chance we could have given up 2 more goals. And that's the thing. You could tell by the way Arsenal were set up, they wanted us to try to go at them so they could hit us on the counter. They sat pretty deep whenever we had the ball. They were waiting for us to try to push ourselves forward, and we didn't take that bait. And so it did lead to some nervousness. As the game wore on, it was still just the 1-goal deficit. And as we started to bring on some of our more talented attacking players, it started to get this feeling of, well, maybe something will happen. Now, like I said, the finishing in the final third, passes in the final third, they weren't there, and that sucks. But that's not on Rosenior, that the players didn't step up. That Fernandez decided to start blazing shots from well outside the box, well over the bar. We had a couple of great free kick chances that Palmer has put away before, and he's not on it right now. Like, Rosenior can't help that stuff. So it just blows my mind again that people want to lump all of this hatred on him. He's barely been here a month, and the only 2 games he's lost is against the team that's at the top of the table right now. Yes, there are rivals, and we hate losing to Arsenal. I get that. But he's still trying to figure things out, and he's won 6 out of his first 8 matches. That's a good return for a manager who's coming into a team that only won 2 in their last, 9 before he came in? And moving on from Rosenior in the Arsenal match, I do also want to say, once again, I'm seeing a lot of stuff about the medical team, about Blueco. And this is where, again, I think there's been a lot of people focusing on the wrong things at the club. I can understand your frustration with Blueco. I totally can. I'm frustrated with them as well. In fact, as much as I criticized Maresca and thought he wasn't going to take us anywhere, Blueco were the one that appointed him, so they're at fault for that. They are also at fault for transfer-wise not doing enough to put us in a good position for this season. That being said, I think even if they had, Maresca wouldn't have taken it any further than where we are. We might be a few more points ahead if we had a replacement for Colwill, but I still think his tactics would have kept us out of the title race again this season, just like it did last season. But the harping on the medical team is really what I wanted to focus on because obviously with James and Neto being out, a lot of people are asking questions. Wait, are they resting them? Apparently that was a report that came out. And this is something else I also find kind of funny that so many people will jump on these media outlet narratives that throw hate on Blueco, but then they'll talk about all these fans, all these Chelsea fans that fall for the Blueco narrative from these media publishers that are bought by Blueco that in their eyes. And I just find that so funny that anybody who does that, oh, you're just ignorant. You're just buying into a story because somebody else said so. And then this report comes out out that James and Neto were rested for the weekend before Rosignor had a chance to talk about it at all, and instantly they're jumping on that. Oh, I can't believe he rested them. How could he do that? So it's okay for you to buy into something somebody else said, but when another fan buys into something this guy said, that's not okay. It makes me laugh. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this harping on the medical staff is because I don't think people are really giving them enough credit for what they have done correctly. Because I do understand the frustration of we want our best players to play. And so the idea that, oh, well, we have to sit him out because the medical team says he's not ready to play. I get that. I understand it's frustrating that they're not playing. However, look at James and Fofana. These two guys, a few years ago, they were incapable of completing more than 5 matches at a time, and then they'd be out for several more months. The manager most of the time would put them back on and have them play full 90s because they're the best players. You want them to play full 90s. And that contributed to them having consistent injury problems. I remember after Eva Canero left, I think that was her name, after she left the club, I remember for the next few years talking about how frustrating it was that we kept having some of these players with the same issues, with the same hamstring problems. We haven't really dealt with that much. Yes, Lavia is still injury prone, and Asugo, don't know where this came from, but he has been as well. And that sucks. And then for Colwell, I mean, ACL is not exactly an injury that is a reoccurring one. It's a freak accident most of the time. So that's not one that's on the medical staff at all. But James and Fofana have been available to us for most of this season. Yes, they've not been able to feature every match, but they're staying fit, which means we are getting them for most of the matches. And something else that also needs to be pointed out is Palmer. Earlier this season, Maresca decided to play him against Man U, even though he was apparently carrying a bit of a knock still, or a bit of a groin issue. He plays him against Man U. When the red card happens, Maresca decides to sub off Estevao and Neto, not Palmer, and then Palmer gets injured because he stayed on the pitch, because he shouldn't have been playing. Now, I don't know if it's been confirmed that the medical staff told Maresca not to play him, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's when the medical staff started having a bit more say-so. And I still don't think they have the final say-so. I think if Rosignor wanted to play somebody, even if they were at risk, I think he would still have that option. But I would not be surprised to find out that Palmer injury, after Maresca decided to play him, I would not be surprised to find out that that's when the medical staff started having a bit more of suggestive power in the dressing room. And like I said, totally get the frustration of not getting to see them play. However, why would you want them to be overplayed and get injured again? Why would you want that? Because it's something that a lot of people were talking about coming into the season. Even Maresca talked about it. The fact that we had to play through the summer, we didn't get much of a vacation and then had to come right back into it. We didn't get much of a preseason either. It was going to affect a lot of these players' fitnesses. And I think we've seen that in quite a few of them. And yet I'm still seeing fans complain that the medical staff is doing too much. It really does frustrate me, because the problem is not with the medical staff. The problem is the transfer team didn't bring in people who could back up this first team squad enough. So whenever guys like Palmer and Estevao can't play, we don't have enough behind them to back up whenever our first team can't start. That's the frustration. And yet people want to zero in on the medical staff as if they're the problem when they're just doing their jobs. Look at the transfer team. Look at the guys that brought in the likes of Delap, Garnacho, Gittins. These are the guys that need to be criticized because they brought in players that are not good enough. And some of the players that we knew weren't going to be good enough. So anyway, just wanted to get that rant out of the way because it's something that I keep seeing and it's something that does frustrate me because it feels kind of ignorant in my opinion. But we move on, talk about the Wolves game tomorrow. This is one where it seems like it should be a win, but that's kind of where we slip up most of the time. Now with Rosignor, we haven't been doing that. He has been stepping up. I'm not expecting this to be a comfortable match. I would not be surprised to see a first half stink fest followed by a second half turnaround and then we go and win it comfortably, because that does seem to be Rosignor's MO right now. But like I said, it's still early days. This is going to be his 9th game in charge. So ultimately what I'm focused on right now is, can he get the result? And if he can, fantastic. That's what we want to see. But I do hope sometime soon we start to see him figure this team out. Because I think part of the problem why we're seeing these first half stink fests is because he's still sort of figuring this team out. He's figuring out what players work best. He's figuring out how to set teams up. He's also figuring out the opponents in the Premier League, because a lot of these teams are setting up differently than the teams he would have faced in Ligue 1. So I think he's also setting the team up. It's not quite working, but he's analyzing it in the first half. And then second half, he figures out how to adjust and then win the game back. That's what it feels like is happening. And I don't really mind that because, again, we're getting the results and it's still early for him. Now, if this continues into next year, that's when it'll be kind of concerning, because at that point, he should have started to analyze these teams a bit better and set us up better from the beginning so we're not having to turn things around in the second half. That'll be where the concern might grow. But for now, again, 9 games in, and people want to act like he should have everything figured out. He should know how all these teams are going to set up. He should know the best way to set up his team. And I think that's really ridiculous, to be honest. But looking at the lineup, what I personally would like to see, so we're crossing our fingers that James and Neto are both available for this weekend. Senior did say it was a knock for both of them, so hopefully he's being literal when he says knock and it's not like a muscle injury. But assuming they're both fit, the only ones that we'll definitely have out are Gittins, Isugo, Lavia, and obviously Colwill. So with that, start with Sanchez in goal. I would like to see James, Chalobah, Fofana, and Cucurella. I don't know when we're going to see Sarr step into this team. Defender is always such a tough one because you don't like to make defensive subs in a match. You don't want to mix up that back line much. So it does feel like he's just going to have to start some matches, but I don't know where that would be. This might be a good one, but personally I think it's probably going to be better to see him start against Hull. So that's why I'm saying Chalobah and Fofana for this match, since they are our 2 best center backs at the moment that we know of. If Sarr comes in and he's even better, fantastic. Getting into the midfield, this is where it's really tough, because I think Caicedo and Fernandez looked a little bit leggy by the end of the Arsenal match, so they might need a break sometime here soon. I guess something that might be a good option for us is maybe to have James in there alongside Santos, and maybe Achimpong at right back. But I do think it probably needs to be Santos and either Caicedo or James. I think we need to have those 2 holding mids to make sure Wolves can't hit us on any counterattacks. But I don't think Fernandez ahead of them is going to really help us in this match because we're going to need a lot more creativity up top. So I think putting Palmer at the 10 is going to be necessary in this match because they are probably going to pack it in and we're going to need some creative talent in there. So I think Palmer at the 10, Esteval on the right, Neto at the left would be our best 3 in behind the striker, or even Esteval on the left and Neto on the right. One of those 2. I feel like those 3 are probably our best options. Neto is a hard worker on both sides of the ball, so he's going to run himself to death. He may not be the most creatively gifted, but he's the best option we have past Esteval when it comes to creating stuff. But Esteval and Palmer in there with Pedro up top ahead of them, I think that is our most creative force. I think the more they get to play together, the more we'll start to see a bit of what we saw against Napoli. But like I said, behind them, that's where it's going to be really interesting to see what Rossinier does here. Because as I've said before, the midfield 3 of Caicedo, Santos, and Fernandez is great whenever a team steps out a bit. I don't think Wolves are going to step that high against us, to be honest, so I don't think that'll work. But also having Caicedo and Fernandez, or even Santos and Fernandez in the midfield, sometimes Fernandez can do the defensive side of the game pretty well, but most of the time he wants to be a box-to-box whenever he's in the midfield. So I feel like it always leaves the other defensive mid isolated in there, which is why we typically wanted an inverted fullback alongside him. But we've seen West Ham, we've seen Brentford, they push their wings up to either take the space that's left open by the inverted fullback or to keep our fullbacks pinned. So that way it does leave just the one defensive mid in there by himself. So I think he's going to have to find that solution. So we'll see what Rossinier decides to do with it. Me personally, I'd probably say my best option would be Caicedo and Santos, James at right back. I guess I can quickly talk about if James and Neto aren't fit still, I'd prefer to see Achimpong at right back. I'm just kind of sick of seeing Gusto at this point. Every time he's on the pitch, there's always something I'm worried about with him. And if Neto's not available, it's probably going to have to be Garnacho. I know there's a chance it could maybe be Delap, but to be honest, I'm just kind of done with Garnacho. I gave him some time. You know, my personal dislike of him as a person, I tried to put that aside for most of this season and try to just look at what he's doing on the pitch, and he's just not done enough. He's had a couple of flashes here and there throughout the season, but it's not been good enough, and so I'm just kind of done seeing him. I'm not excited to see him anymore. But that'll do it for this preview. I will say, probably won't get the review out tomorrow. I'm actually going to be driving up to Ohio, so I'm going to be on the road while the game's going on. Maybe I can do a quick review for it tomorrow and then give a more in-depth look at it whenever I do the preview for Leeds. Yeah, main thing is we need to get a win. The unfortunate thing for us is that Liverpool and Man U have both sort of stepped it up in the past few matches, which means they're less likely now to drop points than they were before, which means we do need to start picking up these points, especially since we're on this good run where a lot of teams we're facing are in the lower half of the table. These are the matches where typically I'd be concerned with Maresca in charge, but with Rossinier, it does seem like he's figuring out how to pick up these points, and that's really what we need to make sure that we're top 4 this season. And that, plus I would say the FA Cup as well. Those are the two things that I do want to see for this season. So with all that being said, those are my thoughts about tomorrow. I hope you guys have a great day. Till then, cue the outro. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe for more Chelsea previews, reviews, and talks. Also, let me know what your thoughts are down below, whether you agree, disagree, or just want to call me stupid. Let me know, we can talk about it, discuss all that good stuff. Also, if you want to hear me talk about TV shows and movies that I like, check out my channel Mason the Brock Henderson, where I upload reviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. As well as if you want to watch me play through video games and try to make it entertaining for you, I have a Let's Play channel, Meso Hendo Plays, where I upload every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Also, if you do want to help me grow this channel, I do have a Patreon where all the fun funds and donations will go directly into improving this channel's quality. But I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to y'all later. Peace out and up the Chels.